Acharya for you today. You all already know, because everybody has a lot of information uh, at in your hands, today. So you all know that Professor Acharya is a distinguished professor at the American University in Washington, and you have seen a lot of his works in the last few days. We have supplied you with with some of his writings, so you would have already gone through some of that. So without much ado, I would now request Professor Amitav Acharya to take the floor, and the format is already known to him, so he'll go according to that. And once he makes his presentation, we'll open the floor for the questions and answers. So that's how we'll go. So to Professor Acharya, please. Before he starts, we have a memento there for Professor Acharya. So I just forgot, we also welcome Professor Mrs. Acharya here and his son, who have accompanied him on this trip. So welcome you all.
All right. So thank you very much, Professor Begg. So I really want to thank him because he's the one has been trying to get me and working with me for about a year to get this thing organized. Because when you submit an application to get the funding from the government, you need to put down the name of one person, resource person, at least one. And so he has been in touch with me for the whole past year or even longer. And thank him very much. And okay, yeah, okay. And thank you, Dr. Hassan. He's here. Yeah, thank you. And everybody, Dr. Imam, okay. And for picking me up from the airport yesterday. We had a long drive, 3.5 hours. So we arrived at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's probably why I will look a little sleepy and tired today. But I will do our best. Maybe you should have some strong coffee for me. All right. So as you have 2 days already, so you know a little bit about from other professors. But my topic is going to be global international relations today. And tomorrow I'll talk about world order. So we'll stretch it out. There's 2 topics, but there are pretty broad topics, and I will divide them up into small sections and go through them. So today is whatever you say in the program. I'm going to talk about global international relations and how it relates to other post-colonialism among others, because that's the name of this whole whole course, whole program. So I'll try to explain to you what is global international relations, how it came about, what are the key features or elements or key points of global IR, and what are the contributions, what are the criticisms global IR is facing, and what are the obstacles. So let me start by talking a little bit about a very broad definition, because there is no definition for global IR, just like there is no definition of theory. I mean, many of you have done international relations, right? Can you raise your hand? How many of you have done international relations? But just even one course, have you? Okay. Okay. Those of you who have not done any course in international relations, can you raise your hand? Because I will try to tailor my conversation to those who have not done it. Keep it very broad, because the majority of you know something about theory, right? Okay. Those of you who don't, I'll give you some idea about it, and you can ask me questions. So, all right. Okay. Now, microphone? Okay. Okay, it's working, yeah. Right, okay, it's better? Okay. So there is no definition of any theory. So those of you know what is realism, what is liberalism, what is constructivism, even post-colonialism. There is no definition. People can only give you a description. So a definition is something that lays out precisely what a concept means. Like in natural sciences, in social sciences, there is no agreed definition. Even concepts like sovereignty, state, or foreign policy, or even international relations, that's the political science. There is no precise definition of what it means. So theories also cannot be defined in one word or one sentence or two sentences or even five sentences. So we just give you a broad idea of what the particular concept or theory means. And global IR is not a theory. It's a kind of a research agenda with theoretical impact, but not like realism or constructivism, like a theory. And even theory, what is a theory means, is not agreed upon. So I probably should say that in international relations, start by saying international relations is also very new as a subject. Most social sciences are new, at least in terms of their name. I mean, you can go back and see when is the discipline of history started. I don't think you'll find it going back to 13th century or 14th century or during the Mughal Empire here. There is no subject called history. So all these fields or disciplines, at least in humanities and social sciences, are new terms. I don't know, sociology, anthropology, art history. There is no really trajectory of this beyond the last century or so. And international relations, when you say maybe somebody would know Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun was a very famous late medieval, early modern Muslim philosopher and a historian, but also considered father of sociology. Nobody in his time will call him a sociologist. Ibn Khaldun is Ibn Khaldun, and nobody will call him an historian. So he's just a writer, and he's a polymath. He did, like most people, he did a lot of different things. Nobody would call Plato. There was a term philosophy, maybe the only one that goes back during the golden age of Islam. There was a falsafa. The Greeks had a term for philosophy, and many people go back and trace the origins of new social science disciplines back in history or natural sciences during the Greek days. But honestly, the Greeks did not have a discipline of international relations or history. Even if you say history comes from historia, but that's the really post facto. We are actually creating the history of a discipline that did not exist. So most of the names of disciplines are modern names, contemporary names. Now, international relations is just like that. It is a modern name, but doesn't mean the subject is modern, okay? And that's the key point. People say international relations is just maybe by most definitions, most accounts, little over 100 years old. So it started with, according to one story, one explanation. It started in 1919, just after World War I ended, and the first chair of international relations was established in Great Britain, in the University of Wales. So, does it mean international relations is only 100 years old? Yeah, the naming, because the chair was named as the chair of international politics, okay, Woodrow Wilson chair of international politics, not international relations. But even if we accept international politics same as international relations, the chair, first chair, it was established, first professorship, endowed professorship was established in 1919. Does it mean international relations started in 1919? That would be very stupid to say that. More important, does it mean international relations started in the United Kingdom or Wales? That will be even more not only unfair, but wrong. And because the subject of international relations is important. When did the subject matter of international relations start? Just like there is no discipline of sociology when Ibn Khaldun was writing, okay? But now we call him I think most of us call him the father of sociology, and maybe a great historian, but he didn't know what sociology meant at that time. Nobody called him sociologist walking around then. But post facto, retrospectively, we think, oh, that's when sociology started, because he is definitely one of the founders. I think most people give him credit for that. So similarly, international relations was named in 1919 as international politics. Does it mean what we are talking about, the subjects we are studying about in international relations started in 1919? No. And also, the added danger is that if we say, okay, international relations began in 1919 in Wales, in United Kingdom, in Europe, in the West, then we automatically assume it's at least British, Western, Eurocentric discipline. So that's what global are trying to challenge. Because what is the subject of international relations? What do you study in international relations? Maybe can one or two people give me just 5 areas that you study, subject matters of international relations. Those of you who have done degrees in international relations, can you tell me what do you study? Anybody? Sorry, one at a time. No, just a subject area. What do you study? One in like a foreign policy. I'll give you one example. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Just raise your hand. I'll recognize you. Okay. Yeah. Diplomacy. Okay. Trade. Trade is and area studies. Okay. Yeah. International law. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. I'm looking for things like international law, things like trade or political economy. What about values and norms, humanitarian values, human rights, right? That's one. So can anybody tell me these things started in 1919, or in Britain, in Wales, in Europe, in the West? So that you get my answer. Most of what I'm going to talk about today and tomorrow in the history is basically about that. Just because we have a field called international relations, which started as international politics with the creation of a chair called the Woodrow Wilson chair. Woodrow Wilson was the American president when World War I happened. It was named after him in Wales. It was endowed by a businessman in the Welsh, where Wales is in United Kingdom, in that area. But does it mean the subjects we study, like diplomacy, like trade, like international law, they started in 1919? It didn't. And did it start in Europe? It didn't. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what global IR is about. You got the idea right from the beginning, before you even go to the very first slide. So the idea is that what we study, even if the discipline, the name of the discipline is called international relations, international politics, or some people call it world politics, global politics, you'll find international studies, you'll find many textbooks with different names, okay? Doesn't mean what we study was started as such in that 1919 period with the first chair. So trade, for example, very important today, right? Trade, tariffs, Trump. When did trade start? Nobody has a clue when trade started. Now, in my new book, which I'll be talking about tomorrow, at least to the Sumerian period, so 3000 BC, we have evidence of trade, and trade not only between within the what is the Arabian, the Mesopotamia area, but there was actually evidence of trade between the Sumerians, the Mesopotamian civilizations, and the Indus Valley civilization, but in India now they call Harappan civilization. Very clear evidence of trade. And so when you want to study trade, when do you start? Similarly, globalization. When did it start? Well, according to the World Economic Forum, it started with the steam engine, when the steam engine was invented, 17th century, 18th century. Or when Europeans discovered, so-called discovered, the Americas. That's Columbus so because that's the time they linked up all the 4 continents. So do you think trade and globalization started either with the 17th century steam engine or the European so-called voyages of discovery, so-called, in the 15th century? That will be a very narrow definition of trade. The foundations of trade and globalization were laid when Asia, Europe, Africa, and the in-between area, Middle East, was linked. And the first civilization that really provided that sort of a link, there are already some evidence of that, but it was the Islamic expansion from Arabian Peninsula to Spain in the 8th century and 9th century. That's when actually globalization started, and it reached a peak around the 15th, 16th century, well before the Europeans actually went around to the Americas or came here to India, to South India, Calicut and Goa, the Portuguese so-called voyages to India. So globalization started there. So when do you start studying globalization then? From that period, not from 17th century or 16th century or 15th century. So global IR tries to actually understand international relations, the subject of international relations. Same for diplomacy. Diplomacy actually is much older. The first boundary marker was done in 2500 BC. There is actually a boundary still in British Museum, which says this is the boundary of the state of Umma and Lagash, and there's a pillar, and there's a treaty there. Our first diplomatic treaty, another milestone was in the peace treaty between. So why aren't we studying this, and why are we just giving international relations? We're talking about. So this is the introduction for my today and tomorrow. Power comes back. So I will start with a very broad definition of global IR, something that you don't have to accept, you can improve on, you can refine, narrow down. That's what definitions are about. Nobody accepts definition of anything by others. Very few people. There are very few terms, as I said, that are universally accepted definition. Everything is contested. But it's useful to have something, working definition. Is that okay? Working? Yeah. So global IR, therefore, is like a collective effort to develop a research agenda with theoretical impact to redefine and broaden. Okay, we'll come back, don't worry. The discipline of international relations by recognizing the histories, ideas, practices, and contributions of societies and actors that have been neglected or marginalized in the existing IR literature. Now, we gave you some readings. The readings are with you. I did not define in any of the readings what is global IR because it will be futile, and most people will focus on the definition and ignore the content, substance. So I usually did not provide the definition. But in my lectures to my students and to courses like this, professional and courses like this, I do try to provide a definition. So take a look at this. It's a collective effort. It's a research agenda with theoretical impact, but not a theory. I never really thought of global IR as a theory, and most people don't also, following my own formulation, don't call global IR a theory, but it can create theory. It can have theoretical impact, and it certainly can produce a research agenda, which is more important. It helps you to develop new topics, new ideas to do research, to write your essays, write your thesis, and produce articles and books. And the purpose is to redefine and broaden the IR, discipline of IR, not to create a new theory and new field. We are working within what we call international relations. Some people have criticized me for not getting rid of everything that we have today called IR and start something very new, or they want to start something different. But this is just like rhetoric. Academics love to talk like that, and that's very understandable. Everybody wants to start something new, something completely different. And I will tell you in a moment, this is one of the points of debate between some of the post-colonial scholars and global IR scholars. They want to start everything new. They want to get rid of everything that exists, but they don't do it in practice. They can't do it. They have to critique. They have to redefine and broaden. So global IR is honest from the beginning, not creating something totally new, totally even revolutionary, meaning rebooting the discipline. Rebooting is a word, so you sort of eliminate everything that exists to start from all over again. That's not what it is, because there is no such thing as a IR discipline that was invented in the 19th or 20th century, because we're talking about practices and ideas, the institutions that have existed all along human history. So we cannot just get rid of this. So we will redefine them, broaden them, and bring in the histories, ideas, practices, and contributions of those societies and actors that have been neglected and marginalized in existing IR literature. And to a large extent, these societies that have been neglected and marginalized are the post-colonial societies. And this is why there is a clear link between global IR and post-colonialism. I use both post-colonial societies or non-Western societies. Now people call it Global South. It used to be called Third World. But those are the societies and states, and not just states but also peoples, that have been marginalized and neglected, because the way we understand the beginning of international relations, having started in the UK, we completely forget, and the literature completely forget about these societies, and the literature and the textbooks continue to reflect that neglect and marginalization. So global IR brings them into the fold, and but at the same time doesn't discard the Western contributions either. So it is in that sense a broadening and redefinition, but not displacing everything that we already know or have. You can challenge the narrowness, challenge the ethnocentric assumptions and narratives of Western IR, but that's part of the game. But that doesn't mean we can say, oh, everything that has been said or written is wrong. This will be very wrong for many reasons, because that's not practical, and secondly, it's not necessary. But global IR is therefore an attempt to be more inclusive, redefine, broaden, without displacing the existing knowledge in international relations. Okay, so the beginning of global IR had to do with as a term, okay, with my presidential address in 2014 in Toronto at the International Studies Association convention. So this is the first time global IR became kind of a thing in the terms of it was front and center. If you know a little bit about the International Studies Association, It is the largest body of largest professional association of mostly scholars, but there are also practitioners, like diplomats sometimes join. But scholars of international relations broadly defined, including political economy, diplomacy, law, international law, and human rights and the like. So it is the largest association of people who teach, do research on, and study. Students are also very much involved in international relations. And it has about, well, depending on the numbers and the years, maybe about 7,000 members all over the world, many of them from the United States, because the meeting usually happens in the US and was founded in the US, but now increasingly broader, increasingly broader. And Europeans are involved, Indians are involved, Chinese are increasingly involved. So this is the Global Association of International Studies, scholars and students. And that is a good platform to introduce a new concept, and that's what Global IR was introduced by me. But that doesn't mean it doesn't, it's just something that pulled out of, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak, that came out of the blue, out of nothing. So it's not like, when the Christians say that God created the universe out of nothing in a single act. No, nothing like this. It's not creationism. It built on a lot of the previous work that had been done, but was articulated in a particular way in that convention. And that person happened to be me. But I also see, if you go back to my earlier definition, it's a collective effort. It's nobody's business. There is no guru of Global IR. It's a recognition that there is a collective effort that's been going around for some time to challenge the discipline of international relations, very narrow Eurocentric identity, which is contrary to what it should be, right? So now we look at and this is basically most of what I'm going to talk about this remaining part of this first session. What are the dimensions of Global IR? And this is very clearly explained in the article that they have got it right, Global, in my presidential speech, the article based on that, very clearly explained. So you definitely should take a look at it, read it to make sense of what I'm saying. But this is pretty much the slide I used in 2014. And even though there have been some additions, refinements, and slightly different formulations, including by me, but I still try as much as possible to stick to it because it sort of corresponds to the original formulation. And I don't think there is anything to really change that has become completely obsolete today. In fact, if anything, in the last 11 years, so 2014, 2025, this has become much more central to debates in international relations. They have become more and more relevant in the last 11 years. Okay. So 6 dimensions, or you can call it 6 elements, and we go through them one by one. Before that, I will have a glass of water. So the first element or a dimension is that it's founded on what I call pluralistic universalism. Now, the term universalism is very central to not only international relations or political science, but all social sciences and humanities. There are, again, a lot of definitions of universalism, but basically there are 2 formulations of what universalism and what being universal means. So one definition is that something, an idea or a norm or a concept or a practice that applies to all. Everybody is basically following that. And that's the kind of the standard Western definition of universalism. It started with the European Enlightenment, although it can go back earlier, when the philosophers of Enlightenment, including people like Immanuel Kant, particularly Immanuel Kant, and the German philosopher, but also you can talk about Rousseau, you can talk about Hegel. They all talked about a particular standard of civilization that should apply to all. It's not applying quite yet, and therefore the humanity is divided into two categories: the civilized and non-civilized. So, what are the standards? Or where is the standards? Where is the standard coming from? It's from Europe. The benchmark set by Europe. It's a benchmark set by Europe, European civilization. So, rationality, kind of a Westphalian state model with sovereignty and ability to conduct diplomacy according to certain principles and rules. What basically the Europeans were doing at that time in the 18th century, particularly in the 18th and 19th century, that was considered universal, and it should apply to everybody. But if it doesn't, then they recognize that vast majority of people in the world don't follow the European standard. They are sort of backward, including countries like China, which is very ironic, and India also. They were not part of, they did not meet the criteria of Europeans. So they are not civilized. So the idea of universalism, some philosophers just ignored them. They said, just forget about them. Like Hegel, for example, said Africa, oh, don't worry about Africa. Africa is not part of history. But some, like Immanuel Kant, said, okay, we have to bring them up to our standards. And until we do that, they deserve to be colonized. So Immanuel Kant is a very complex figure. So considered the most important philosopher of enlightenment. And in some ways, he critiqued colonialism. He actually criticized European colonialism for being harsh and unjust. But he would not condone anti-colonial movements, or he would still support colonialism as a kind of a transitional period to bring these countries up to the standards of Europe. And until they do, they deserve to be colonized. So the idea of universalism then is that there is a standard, one set of, just one example, that's based in the European model, European diplomatic norms, European state system, and until then, until other countries achieve this, they don't deserve to be colonized. They don't deserve to be independent. So what you see is there are a couple of problems here. One is that you're using basically European standards on everybody else. But what is preventing other countries, particularly let's look at India, for example, since you will be more familiar with that. What is preventing India from becoming like Europeans? Well, two things. Number one, they are a British colony or European colony, not just British, by the way. The French had colony here of the Portuguese at Goa until 1960s. So most of the so-called global south was under colony. So how can they achieve European standards when they don't have agency? And the only way they can achieve is the Europeans civilize them. So this was kind of condoning imperialism and racism. So Immanuel Kant is a very substantial, significant racist. Very racist attitude towards all other cultures. Only Europeans can actually achieve civilization. So that's something I've discussed extensively in my new book. So on the one hand, talking about universalization, very noble idea. Everybody should have the same values, same norms. Colonialism is bad in the long term, but in the meantime, sanctioning racism, and sanctioning imperialism until the indefinite, and also how can just denying the independent agency of countries like India, China, which are actually far older, and of course you can talk about the Sumerians and others who have a lot longer history than the Europeans, or longer so-called civilized history. So that's the problem. That sort of universalism doesn't help you. It actually supports imperialism and colonialism. So some post-colonial scholars have criticized it, and one can draw on that, but not just post-colonial scholars. People who do, for example, constructivism have criticized it, postmodern approaches have criticized it, and global IR, of course, keeps it front and center. That this idea of singular universalism, what I call monistic, so singular universalism, one size fits all, that idea is not only wrong and false, but also created, or still continues to create, a excuse for imperialism and racism. So as opposed to that is the formulation called pluralistic universalism, that it doesn't say one size fits all. So if people like Kant or others would have recognized that, hey, different civilizations have, different standards. What it means to be civilized can vary from place to place, country to country, culture, and time to time. The same Europeans had a very different idea of what it meant to be civilized earlier on. So the idea of civilization changes from region to region and country to country, or time period to time period. It doesn't mean there is a cultural exceptionalism, that everybody is totally unique and we should do everything should be done in the way the local actors believe it to be. That can be also the other extreme. If you think that everybody is unique, everybody is exceptional, and there could be all sorts of standards, that's also going the other way, cultural relativism. But I think it's possible to have common ground. So you can have universalism, but based on pluralism. So when you marry pluralism, and in this case political ideas, political institutions, ideas of world order, you acknowledge those diversity, but still say there are some common elements among them. Partly because, yes, there is something universal about being human, okay? Human beings tend to provide similar solutions to similar problems. We are all, there is a certain level in which human beings can be differentiated. Human beings everywhere in the world can be differentiated as a category from, say, whatever, aliens from other planets, or marine life, or animals. But yeah, so there is a common element to humanity. Therefore, there can be a common element, a shared element to universal ideas. But at the same time, one has to recognize differences and diversity. So when you try to marry these two, reconcile diversity with singularity, you come up with what is called pluralistic universalism. Not one size fits all, but respect diversity and try to find common ground. And sometimes that common ground is not obvious to you. You have to negotiate it. So it is possible that, before the Europeans so-called discovered the New World, Americas, it is possible that when they first met, they found a lot of differences completely. But later research found out there are a lot of similarities. The empire of the Incas, one of the largest empires in the world in the 15th century, a lot of similarities with in institutions and ideas with some empires of India. For example, the Gupta empires, or even the Mongols. So you can find similarities while acknowledging differences. And that has to be also sometimes negotiated. Sometimes you have to know each other. The first reaction of two very strange people could be mutual attraction or mutual contempt, or fear. But after you have talked to each other, got to know each other, you will develop understanding and mutual respect. So pluralistic universalism is not something a given you start with, but you can negotiate and build on it through interactions. So that's basically the idea that stands in, and that, sorry, I just want to step back a moment. That negotiation has to be based on equality and mutual respect, not hierarchy and imperialism. So when you bring this together, pluralistic universalism is basically what we call unity in diversity. There are many different ways of expressing it. Recognize differences, respect differences, but try to discover a common ground that may already exist or build on it, create it through interaction. Now, to me, a lot of international relations is like that. Sorry, I will take all the questions at the end because at the end I'll give you some time and you do that. That's the way I will conduct it. Okay, I'll take that in the end. Okay, just hold on to it. And also, when you ask a question, could you give them a microphone because I have difficulty understanding it. I'll come back to you. I'll recognize you. Okay. My style is to give the lectures first and then take the questions. So it makes me feel better. We're not past the time yet. How much time we have before 11 o'clock? Yeah. What's the time now? Yeah. So I'll try to wrap up a couple of those points. Right. That's the first element. The second element is very important. It will come up in the next topic, that it is grounded in world history, not Greco-Roman history or European history or American history. So a lot of what I have been talking about is just about that we can not build a discipline of international relations only looking at European history, or Europeans, of course, acknowledge and actually credit their own identity and civilization to Greece and Rome. So a lot of what Europe has appropriated as Western or European is actually traced back to Greco-Roman origins, linguistically, but also conceptually. So when you talk about Eurocentrism, you can actually substitute it for Greco-Romanocentrism. So partly because a lot of the modern ideas, concepts, linguistically, in English, for example, come from Latin or Greek roots, whether it's sovereignty, whether it's norms, whether it's, there is a whole list of terms that I have identified in my book that have Greco-Roman origins linguistically. So just because, say, democracy has demos kratos, Greek terms, so we think democracy was invented by Greeks. Just because linguistically it is, or sovereignty, super, in Latin, doesn't mean only the Romans invented sovereignty, because that's the way we have the linguistic sort of, it's a kind of linguistic imperialism in some ways. But other civilizations also had conceptions of democracy, conceptions of sovereignty. Give you an example. In India, in classical India, there is a period of republics before the Maurya Empire. So in 600 BC, India had more than a dozen republics, and mostly in North India we recognize it. They were called Gana Sanghas, Gana Sangha. So very literally, association of people, right? So why? But we don't call democracy as Gana Sangha. We call democracy because it's demos and kratos, the Greek roots. So that's one reason why we have Greco-Romanocentrism linguistically. But also the Europeans have appropriated, quite falsely by the way, the Greek ideas and Greek civilization as Western or European. No such thing. Greeks did not consider themselves as European. In fact, if you read my book, and I was fascinated when I found this, the Greeks actually thought, to put it very bluntly, that Europeans are very brave people, but very stupid people. The Asians are actually very smart, but cowardly, not very brave. So only Greece, which is in between Europe and Asia, is both smart and brave. So for Europeans to say Greek civilization was their ancestor is so ironic. if not wrong. So the Greeks were Greeks. They saw themselves as the Mediterranean civilization, superior to everybody else. The Romans also did not see themselves as European. They were also Mediterranean and Roman. The Roman Empire conquered all of Mediterranean. Every single state, or literal, every single territory of Mediterranean was conquered by Rome and beyond. So the Romans were Romans. They are not European. So later Europeans in the Renaissance and Enlightenment found out that they didn't have actually a very civilized past. So they thought, okay, we have Greece and Rome. So they are us, we are them. They are our ancestor. It's like, well, the French historian Brodel has a line about this, that every civilization has the need to have an ancestor. And we Europeans didn't have that ancestor, so we thought Greece and Rome are ancestors. But that doesn't mean they were Europeans. Now, if you think about this, then you think that's Greco-Roman history, which became basically the basis of European centrism, and of course American centrism. The United States appropriated a lot of European ideas, building its identity. So that's the history on which international relations is based. And we are trying to challenge that. Study world history, global history. Now, global history meaning starting with Africa, where human beings originated from Africa. Never forget that. And that's a contribution to civilization. There will be no civilization without human beings, and they originated in Africa. And we talk about, of course, Asia. I don't want to be Indo-centric or Sino-centric. That just because we are challenging Eurocentrism, it's become Indo-centric or India-centric or China-centric. That will be another mistake. There is a lot of contributions from Africa, a lot of contributions from what we call as the Middle East. It's a Western term, but Eurasia is a very good term for that. Europe and Asia, the Middle Asia, part Central Asia, a lot of contributions from there, a lot of contributions from the Islamic core of the Middle East, Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, states stretching all over to Al-Andalus, and of course the Inca, Maya, and American Indian civilizations. So that's global, and South Pacific as well. South Pacific, increasingly, we find a lot of evidence of trade and statecraft in the middle of the South Pacific. So that's the history we should draw on. So we call it global history or world history. I call it world history, but I'm happy to use global history because there is a movement to create global history. All right, so I will give you these two key points, and I'm happy to take some questions for the remaining time. And you can drink your tea, and then we will have a break and come back and finish up the other 3 points, because this is basically the main thing I'm going to talk about. Right, but please use a microphone and speak slowly and as loudly as possible.
Thank you, Professor Amitav Acharya. I'm also a faculty member here.
Right.
But I sit with the students sometimes. So your lecture is very interesting, but as a teacher...
Can you hold it close to? Yeah, I have a hearing problem.
Yeah, I'm saying that your lecture is quite interesting, but as a teacher and as a students, we have to keep on seeing things above and inside, what it is and what it is not.
I'm having difficulty. I'll come close to you. Yeah.
Okay, so should I come to you closely? Because no, okay, I'm coming. You be there because you be there. I'm coming. Yeah. So I'm saying that you gave one example about pluralistic universalism, especially in the context of America.
Context of America?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I find that, why I raise my hand, because the context of America, especially in the context of defining pluralistic universalism, does not fit to me. I may be wrong. But on the basis of my own understanding and reading, I find that America and Canada and Australia, these are the places where the people who fled from the European part during the Reformation period, during the clashes between the Catholics and the Protestants, they went and they settled, and the 100% majority became 1%. So if in 200, 300 years, if you find in America like Native Americans. So they are 1 or 2%, except 1 or 2%. Because I have been to
Yeah.
New Mexico
Yeah.
also, where you have a
You're talking
large
about
number.
Native Americans.
Yes,
Yeah.
Native Americans. You have also Native Canadians, the
Yeah,
Red
yeah,
Indians.
yeah.
They are about 2%. In Australia, same. That's why these three countries, especially in Western Europe, are known as
Yeah.
settler states. Except in New Zealand, where Maoris,
Yeah.
very powerful native, they reduced to 15%. So my point is that if a native people of a particular region are reduced by force from 100% to 2% in 200 years, do you think that there can be any dialogue between the two?
Yeah.
If it is a dialogue, it will not be. This is one, Professor Amitabh. The other, this is not a question. This is my submission.
No,
I may
no,
be
no, that's a
wrong.
good point. And I get your point. And let me just try to respond briefly. And that's an excellent point. First of all, when I said global IR kind of wants to bring in civilizations and societies that have been marginalized, I don't really mean other states only. I also mean people within states. In fact, if you read that article, in the first footnote or second footnote, it talks about Native Americans. Very much so. So we have to, yeah, we have done a lot of research. My family had been with see Maori places in New Zealand. In April, I was a visiting professor there. We have traveled in North America with the Iroquois. In my new book, there is a whole sections on Native Americans. There is a chapter on the Mayas and Incas, but also the Native people of what is now United States and Canada. And so there are two things here. This global IR thinks they are also important because they have been marginalized. But that's not enough. We have to study the history of these people, what ideas they contributed, okay? So when I talked about global IR, it was at a conceptual level. When I did this book, it's actually at a very empirical level. It talks about 5,000 years of history and covers all civilizations. Maybe not so much Maoris, because I was not an expert on South Pacific, but I do include them and will include them more in the future. So they have ideas about, for example, what the Chinese today call peaceful coexistence, okay? That's a geopolitical term. But the idea that you can have a confederation and multiple states can live peacefully for hundreds of years came from native North Americans, the Iroquois, 5 or 6 later, tribal groups. And they might have started this in the 11th, 12th century, but they did not end until the creation of the United States. They're the first people who recognized the United States as an independent country when the US was still fighting with the British. Their constitution, the Iroquois constitution, was actually inspirational to people like Benjamin Franklin. Even the Americans don't recognize it very much. The US Congress actually has recognized it. The idea that a group of very independent, separate states can actually live peacefully for hundreds of years through agreements and through norms, and where women had a very significant equal status, is inspirational. In fact, Benjamin Franklin said, if these tribes, he of course called them barbarians, but if these tribes can live peacefully among themselves for hundreds of years, why can't we the colonies trying to draft a constitution of the United States, why can't we do it if they can do it? So that's a direct inspiration from the Iroquois. The Incas, Mayas, Aztecs, many other created civilizations and world orders, including empire, including trade, including even humanitarian values that are very relevant to it today. So we did not think about it because of either ignorance, that we didn't know about it, or prejudice, that Westerners dismissed them. But in my book, I made sure that you cannot have global IR without world history. And the world history or global history has to include not only India, China. In fact, India and China just get one chapter, but there are chapters on Africa, chapters on, of course, Islam, very important, and the Americas, because and people living within the US, as you said, they have been reduced by imperialism and by disease brought by the Europeans, and total marginalization in the Constitution today. But we have to recognize that marginalization, but also at the same time, one of the problems of post-colonialism is they talk too much about marginalization, how people have been marginalized, ignored. Very rarely they actually looked at what actually they have contributed. So post-colonialism, and this is my biggest beef with, sorry, shouldn't be using beef as a Hindu, but biggest problem with post-colonialism is that they are all almost, for them, the world history starts when colonialism was founded, whether it's 15th century or 16th century. Post-colonialism doesn't talk much about pre-colonial period, this historical period, and that's what I have been challenging them, that you cannot simply start with the 15th century and then you talk about marginalization, talk about oppression, talk about all these problems global South is facing. But what they did before, and very little of post-colonial research agenda is about this, the contributions of these civilizations, nations, societies before the arrival of the Europeans or colonization by Europeans. So that's also the other element of world history, and goes back to your question. If you want to study these people and marginalization, you also talk about their contributions. Right. So that point is well taken.
It was not a question because I didn't come here to make a question because your lecture is very important. You are coming from a 5,000 kilometer distance. The last thing can be taken as a question when you made the first screen in which you proposed a kind of theoretical formulation in terms of collective effort by certain groups or different pluralities.
Yeah.
So I think that as a part of deliberation, the word collective sound very good for the purpose of rhetoric or for the purpose of narrative, because we academicians are also involved in these things. But when you go for the theoretical formulation, then it has a question, because not only the European, I'm not taking European in terms of medieval thing, in terms of Roman era or in terms of the Greek area, but I am taking European especially in the context of the three European intellectual movement, that is Renaissance, Reformation and Enlightenment.
Yeah, I think so.
So these three European intellectual movements, they constructed the base of the modern state, modernity or secularity or territoriality, etc. Now in that case, these things, the concept or the method or the principles or the framework or a kind of thought related to international relations are so deeply, overwhelmed by the European experiences, especially after Machiavelli, that it will be very difficult for the collective to become collective in terms of impact. So this can be taken as a question or a comment. So this is the last. Thank you.
I'll take it as a comment, and maybe later on I can address it. Let's take some. Yeah. Yeah. Same. Use the microphone and speak. Yeah. And speak slowly and loudly.
Hello, sir. I'm.
Not working. Oh.
Hello, sir. I'm Nishant from Sophia College, Ajmer. Hello, sir. I'm Nishant from Sophia College, Ajmer. Sir, I wanted to know how to move away from the mold of nation states established by European societies through international law, sort of delegitimizing the history before it. How global IR is sort of running, is it running parallel to the westernized westernized IR discipline that we already being taught, or is it going to ever interact or replace this biased understanding that we've been taught?
Okay, I can answer that very well and very nicely, and this is a great question. Global IR does not displace anything. Okay, that's my fundamental disagreement with post-colonialism. because I don't think all the Western IR is equally bad. And also, if you look at, I don't know about among ourselves, but look at India, Indian IR community. There are a lot of people who still do realism, liberalism. I mean, Kanti Bajpai, a good friend of mine, has identified 3 different traditions. Only one of them is the Kautilyan realist tradition. One of them is post-colonial tradition. One of them is the liberal tradition. So who am I to say we had to replace all this? Now, I was a keynote speaker at the India International Annual Conference. And actually, the idea of global IR was first presented in New Delhi in 2013, December, before I gave my presidential speech. And I remember, this was the Congress government at that time, and Shiv Shankar Menon, I was presiding over, and the then foreign minister, and this whole thing was funded by the government of India. And Mr. Menon joked that, hey, we are funding you, and 98% of you are post-colonial, and you're criticizing us. And he got a very good laughter out of it. And actually, the vast majority of people there were post-colonial. But I also know there are a lot of people like yourself who are not. They do realism. They do admire some enlightenment thing. I used to be a big admirer of Immanuel Kant until I knew more, but I still do. So what I'm trying to say, to answer your question, no displacement, but challenge. That when a scholar or Western theory or idea, like what I said about Kant, racist, but did criticize colonialism, and that had an influence. Did create the foundation of a universal organization like the UN, for example. It's kind of in some ways owes to the ideas of Kant. So the global IR is some way is more inclusive than post-colonialism or Western IR. And that's the niche of global IR. If I come and tell you, get rid of everything we have, I will be not only wrong conceptually and intellectually, because there are also a lot of similar. Europeans also learned a lot of ideas from Islam and India. They got mathematics from India. They got philosophy from Islam, which is kind of Greek philosophy, but modified and enhanced by Islamic philosophers. They got ideas from China. So we have to look at this collective pool of knowledge that exists. And that's why I'm reluctant to say global IR displaces. But you challenge where you see Eurocentrism, where you see racism, where you see exclusion. So maybe the narrow sort of theories that we have, like the theories of Kenneth Walsh and John Mearsham, very narrowly focused. Liberalism is actually the worst, because they think liberalism only started in Europe and US, and everybody should follow it. Realism actually sometimes acknowledges non-Western foundations. But anyway, we're challenging them to be more broad and inclusive, rather than saying what you said is so wrong because you condone racism, which is true, that we have nothing to do with you. That's different from post-colonialism. But I'm very happy to have the disagreement with them, and I get criticized for it. People think global IR is exactly it's kind of recycling European knowledge. No, far from that. But I acknowledge the criticism. Okay, there is a way. There's a reason why people might think like that without this sort of explanation. But it's also good to be different. Some of my post-colonial colleagues and friends, I'm very close to them. They actually think it's good that you have a different take on IR than us, because otherwise we'll all be the same, right? We don't want all to be the same. And so I have carved out, not only me, increasingly in a number of people, I'll tell you how global IR is flourishing now around the world. They find global IR a medium to take the middle ground. And there is also a decolonial. There is also now pluriversal. I've joined the editorial board of a new journal called Pluriversalism. I'm quite happy with all of them. I'm very happy also to have liberalism and realism, as long as you acknowledge the ethnocentric exclusionary roots and do something about it. And it's also a better approach to, my goal is to make sure that international relations become a really inclusive discipline. How everybody can have a voice, everybody can have a role. And that's this way, global IR way is better than the mutually exclusive talking past each other way. Okay, so take another student's question. Yeah, over there. Take the microphone and
Good morning, sir. My name is Sakshi, and
if I can't hear you.
my question is,
oh yeah, that's good.
yeah. So, do you see global IR evolving into multiple regionally rooted theoretical traditions, such as an Indian school, Chinese school, or African school of IR, or its primary purpose is to remain as overarching pluralist framework that connects these diverse voices?
Okay, some of these questions you're asking are anticipating what I was going to talk about. So perhaps I will come back to this later, because I will be talking about this in the next session. The national schools, and as you said, Chinese, Indian. There is no Indian school of IR anyway. There is a Chinese school of IR, and people are talking about creating, Singapore School of IR, for example. But that's a very valid, very important question about global IR. So I make a note of that, and I will make sure I will address that. Yeah. Over there? Yeah. Use the microphone, please. In 1976, 77.
76, 77, Stanley Hoffman said about IR as a American social science discipline.
Yeah.
Just to highlight the American hegemony over the discipline. But I personally feel not just the discipline, but the whole institutional structure of IR is dominated by the United States.
Yeah.
And you being the president of International Society, International Studies Association in 1914,
2014.
You also saw how the American, this ISA Association annual convention is particularly held either in America or in Canada. So do you think that as a former president of ISA, do you think that the venue should change from North America to Asia, Europe? When we are talking of global IR, the venue should also shift. So I don't think, do you have any plan for that?
I would love to answer that, but let me just tell you, the current president of ISA, very good friend of mine, Siba Grovgui, is from Guinea, right? First African ISA president. So I was the first non-Western, non-white ISA president. But he is the first African ISA president. He won't get a visa if he comes to US as a Guinea, because I think Trump has banned certain West African countries. So I think many people in ISA, including myself, I'm not involved deeply in ISA anymore, but I still stay in touch. We would love to take ISA out of US, but you can't do that. So I know this very well. First of all, majority of ISA members paying the dues are Americans, so ISA will lose financial support. Second, there will be also institutional. The ISA till now gets tax breaks as a non-profit, and also universities are willing to support this in the United States. But that can change. I'm sure European universities will be very happy to host ISA headquarters. The Chinese don't want to get into ISA very much because Taiwan is a member, but if that changes, the Chinese can support. We can find support from ISA headquarters in Korea, for example. That is possible and that should be done. But institutional is a bit difficult, but I can tell you that a lot of people are talking about not having ISA outside of the US. There has been ISA conventions outside of the US. So my first ISA convention was in actually London. That's the only time they had ISA's main convention in London. But they found that it was financially a disaster and difficult to organize. But we have done this in Canada. My speech was in Toronto, so I was elected as ISA president in Toronto. Not that Canadians are necessarily any better, but they're nothing like Trump. They don't ban countries from coming to US or harass you that much. They can deny you a visa, but once you get a visa, they don't harass you like the Americans do. And Mexico, only once. Ironically, it was done in Acapulco, which is a very nice beach resort area, and everybody went to the beach and nobody attended the meeting. So no more Mexico. I think a lot of people will be happy to have it in Cancun. But I think those things will happen because of Mr. Trump. Point well taken. I mean, there have been other non-Western presidents since. My friend T.V. Paul was another one, but most remarkably, Shiva Grobui, post-colonial, first time a post-colonial, true blue post-colonial scholar, African has become president. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, your sir, initiating point about the global IR.
Sorry, who is speaking? You over
yes,
there.
sir.
I thought, yeah.
Sam, yes, sir. So my question is related to the first dimensions, which you are talking about that we need to have a pluralistic universalism, and for which the recognition and the respecting diversity is necessary. And you pointed out that for recognizing and respecting the diversity, there is a need of establishment of common ground. But for having the common ground, we need to have a common interest. And for having the common interest, it is necessary to somehow assimilate your interest into the existing ones, the dominating interest. So, sir, how can we find a common ground when we are already knowing that we have a conflictual entities?
Already
And
knowing
often,
what?
most often, sorry, sir.
Yeah, okay,
So most often the similar common ground is often been exclude the differences. So we are actually not diversified the international relation. We somehow, the kind of homogenize the interest in international relation. And another, sir, I want to add into it just, so without having the democratic global system, how can we add diversities and all these differences, recognizing them? Because there is still assimilation and the accommodation of the interest. On the other hand, there is also the difference of and arms, sir. If you are problems and giving the solution, it is not the recognition. I should have also the right for issues and proposing the solution. Have also recognized my solution, sir. My point on it.
Okay. Take that question and her question. What's the time we're doing? Because I want to continue. Okay. We'll have a break. We'll definitely come back and all about your questions anyway. So I will. Two questions I haven't addressed. I think the ISA institutional question is the common interest versus common ground to achieve when we have our global system and interests, and also the question about the national schools. Very important question from can we have a break now? Yes. You have to also give me a break, right? You don't want to make me too tired. So we stay here or